Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by RCAT. This is a show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My guest today is Emily Ray, AIA, Project Architect at Wheeler Kearns Architects in Chicago, and AIA Chicago 2024 Dubin Family Young Architect Award winner. Emily is dedicated to equity-driven design for nonprofit and community-based clients in education, arts, and social services. A project architect at Wheeler Kearns Architects since 2017, her award-winning work includes Broadway Youth Center, Great Lakes Academy expansion, and the Bernard Zell Emmett, I don't know if I said that right, day school expansion. As a founding member of AIA Chicago's LGBTQIA+ Alliance, she mentors as well as advances inclusivity in architecture. AIA Chicago honored her with the 2024 Dubin Family Young Architect Award. The project we will be talking about today is the Broadway Youth Center Project, also in Chicago. Planted in Chicago's Lakeview neighborhood, just steps from the Sheridan Red Line station, the Broadway Youth Center, or BYC, stands as a safe and welcoming space for the city's LGBTQIA+ youth. Operated by Howard Brown Health and built with a trauma-informed design, this 5-story brick-clad building is more than just a healthcare facility. It's a home, a haven, and a symbol of community care. Now, let's get into the details. Welcome back to Detailed. My guest today is Emily Ray, AIA, Project Architect at Wheeler Kearns Architects in the beautiful city of Chicago, and AIA Chicago 2024 Dubin Family Young Architect Award winner. The project we are talking about today is the Broadway Youth Center Project, also in Chicago. Emily, welcome to Detailed. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out of what I'm sure is your busy schedule to chat with me today. So we always start every episode with an icebreaker question, warm us both up and get to know you a little bit. And so for you today, I was thinking about this a lot. I do a lot of mentoring. And I usually, you kind of find your tribe. I quickly feel connected to others who do the same. And I felt that way when I was just reading your bio. It's like, okay, this is my people. Your bio says that you are a founding member of the AIA Chicago LGBTQIA+ Alliance, and that you work to mentor and advance inclusivity in architecture. I greatly applaud that. So first, let's start there. Tell me about that effort and what brought you to get involved.
Sure. So for that particular learning group in the AIA Chicago chapter, the way it came about, it was back in, I think, 2019. My boss, Larry Kearns, came and tapped me on the shoulder one day during work and say, "Hey, I've heard talk about this group starting in the AIA Chicago office, and it's actually a knowledge community." And he said, "So do you want more details?" And I said, "Sure." So I emailed the organizer, and it started out with just probably 12 people around the table at the AIA office, just kind of saying like, "Okay, look, this organization doesn't yet exist," which is kind of surprising that it doesn't yet exist. What do we want it to be? What do we want to do with it? What are our goals? What is the mission? And over, I guess, the past 6 years, our main mission has evolved to be mainly outreach and just visibility. So a lot of what we organize is, we always participate a lot in events during Pride Month, during the month of June. We participate in the Pride Parade in the city of Chicago. We organize a lot of different social events that oftentimes raise money for local organizations that support LGBTQ young people in particular. So for the most part, our mission has been visibility. And I think in the city of Chicago, it's perhaps not, some may not consider it to be so mission critical, but we have spread to several other cities in the US, a couple in Texas. We have a New York chapter now, but our goal is hopefully, some smaller towns will also start to have an LGBTQ chapter, just to create for networking opportunities and just to create a support system and equip people. I think in architecture, it can be a little conservative. It can be a conservative field. So, at least personally, my goal is to equip people to bring their more authentic selves to the office.
We've had a very similar effort in Portland CSI, which is my organization, obviously as a spec writer. My day job is a spec writer. I'd love to pick your brains later for some ideas to improve our own program.
For sure.
Uh, so let's talk about this project. I am absolutely in love with everything about this project. For a number of reasons. I personally had which I've talked about on the podcast before, a rather difficult upbringing. And so anything that serves youth for any reason and does a good job of it, I'm pretty excited to see. Um, Give me a little background on what brought this youth center to reality.
Sure. So, Howard Brown Health is a health and social services network in Chicago. They have several different existing locations, and they've been around for decades. So, it's an extremely well established organization serving people who identify as LGBTQ primarily. But the Broadway Youth Center is one specific group within that larger organization that is specifically targeted to supporting young people ages 12 to 24. And so the Howard Brown Health Broadway Youth Center had been operating out of a 4,000 square foot storefront on Broadway Street, just north of Irving Park in Chicago. So in the Boys Town neighborhood of Chicago, or maybe that's uptown, but the lines kind of blur. So they were extremely successful in that location. I think they actually started out in the basement of a church, even further north in the city. And then they grew into their own storefront. And then it came time for them to grow even more. They were looking to grow from 4,000 to 20,000 square feet. And most Howard Brown Health, uh, you know, buildings operate in existing buildings. They're just interior renovations. And this was an opportunity to build from the ground up and really kind of try to capture the ideals and the mission of that organization in a ground up building. So it came together with a pretty lofty goal to take this very tight knit, organization where these kids were there every single day because many didn't have another place to go during the day. Many of the staff members actually grew through that organization before they transitioned to become staff members. So all this to say, it's extremely tight knit. They're in this one storefront. And then our challenge was to expand that over several different floors and yet maintain that tight knit community. So that's how the project came about.
I know that one of the biggest issues with any kind of organization, again, that serves people or helps people is funding. Um, how were they able to, because this is a pretty incredible building. I mean, we haven't told everybody about the building yet, but how were they able to manage to get the funding to do this?
Yeah, I think it's the legacy of the organization. It is such a deeply rooted, like I said, decades, it had been established for decades. So I think that there was, those deep roots, and that does help a lot with, this organization equipping them to finance a projects like this. But I will not try to say that, we weren't working on a strict budget because it was a very budget conscious project.
Oh, I'm sure. Um, So I want to make sure that we're defining some things for our listeners before we start digging into the building details. So, for our listeners who are not familiar, explain to me what it means to use, quote, trauma informed design principles.
Yeah, so you alluded to having had some difficult experiences in your childhood. Trauma informed design is really just a process of empathy. I think it's just like a formal name for empathize with your client and put yourself in their position, understand, w- you know, what reactions they have to certain stimulus in the environment. So it can really run the gamut. It can mean a lot of different things. At least I think it can mean a lot of different things. But in general, it means understanding that the end users that you're trying to support and serve here have gone through experiences you may not understand, but you need to gain that understanding and then minimize those hurdles in your building, like whether it's sounds, sights, a feeling of needing to have spatial control. So you really need to create a feeling of safety and security within the building. A few examples of trauma informed design that we used in this project. There's some very simple, kind of straightforward ones, like whenever you have a room, make sure that there's no one that feels that they're trapped in a corner. Like make sure there's always several different exits. Give people autonomy. Never make people feel like like they're stuck somewhere. In this, it's apt that the train is going by right now because in this building, sound was actually really, really important. And I learned this through the programming phase of the project. We learned that many of these young people had experiences living on the street, and the sound of a siren was extremely triggering to them. So, and we were building this building across from a hospital, actually, which on one hand, like we're a health services building. There's certainly, maybe it's a good thing to be across from a hospital. There's a lot of things that they can connect with. But what I learned through talking to these young people was we need to absolutely minimize the sound of sirens. And so we used triple pane glazing, which is not cheap. But that was like a very high priority investment. It was never on the chopping block to be removed from this project because from day one, we understood sirens cannot be infiltrating this particular safe space. And then also the building is located like I am right now, just 5 feet from the train station. So that triple glazing helps minimize, a lot of that external stimulus and create a more peaceful environment.
Uh, but we'll get into some of these spaces in more detail as we move along through this interview. But just broadly, tell me what kinds of, in this particular building, in these 5 stories, what kind of services and facilities are offered here?
So most Howard Brown Health facilities focus on medical care, but Broadway Youth Center in particular focuses on a combination of medical and social services. The medical services, and they really work together to support one another. So they try to get young people in the door for one certain service and then connect them to all these other services that they may not have known that they needed or may have been hesitant to seek out. So, really, this building is like a net. It's like a network in physical form. So, the medical services are everything from STD testing to providing, gender affirming care to basic medical services. And then the social services include there's a lot of vocational programs helping kids get their GED, connecting kids with other job opportunities. There is a donation center so kids can go there and get clothes if they're going to go into an interview. And then I think the heart of the building is really just, like I said before, a community space for kids to go when they may not have another place to be. They go there, they find their friends. You were talking about your people and your network. This building is that for these young people. They're going and saying like, we have very similar experiences, and it's been hard for us to find a connection with people, because of, who I'm discovering that I am, and this building supports that journey for them. So, the heart of the building is the drop-in space. It is just a community space with games, and, video games. There's a dance room. They can, vogue in the dance room. They can sit around and read. It's just it's just a place to hang out.
I'm trying to imagine what the planning process looks like for a project like this. Like, I mean, you already mentioned the trauma informed design principles. I am just wild guessing, and this I don't know, that this wasn't just architects and owners in a room somewhere, that you probably got a lot of input from the people who would be using this building. So, what did planning look like in programming for this?
Yeah, I love talking about the programming for this project. I love the programming phase. It's my favorite phase. I think particularly for projects like this, gone are the days where an architect comes in and knows how to design a building before they talk to the end users. So what we did is we spent about 6 weeks, doing a lot of different interviews and observations at their existing location. We joined several of their community meet every day around noon. I think they would have a community meeting, and it's just a loosely organized, meeting where kids are talking about, like, what happened to them the day before. They had different topics, but we would just sit in to those meetings, to just, again, understand, gain that empathy piece, understand where these kids are coming from, young people are coming from. So we spent about 6 weeks, trying to, use interviews and observation to build that empathy piece. And then the understanding of the network of the building was extremely daunting because the bubble diagram was insane. We were like, the kids come in for this service and then they get connected to this. So this room needs to be close to this room. And like I said, everything was in one simply connected room. And we were like, how are we going to connect these kids to all these different services across several floors and not just have them be lost in a stairway? Like, how, because a lot of it is staff making sure that kids know that these services exist and kind of prodding them, like, hey, while you're here, have you ever thought about doing such and such? So you don't wanna, like, once they're in the door, you don't wanna, like, just lose track of them. So, the network diagram was really intense and finally distilled. We tried several different versions of this layer cake and how to manage the words that the staff used was flow. So how to manage the flow, that's just what we heard every meeting, like, "I don't think the flow is working. I don't think the flow is working." So, ultimately, I do know that the flow works because I've been back several times, and the staff said, "Trust me, the flow is working. It's working like clockwork."
So, this is a 5-story, long, narrow building. So, starting with the site, because I'm looking at this and this looks tight. This looks really tight. What did you have to work with?
Yeah, we were surprised that this was the site they selected. Um, we were always kind of like, "Hmm, it's gonna be a challenge," but they wanted to locate it in that specific neighborhood because, it is like a nucleus of that particular group of people, and they would really get, a lot of traction being located in that neighborhood, and it's an extremely dense neighborhood, so there's not a lot of available space. So, we, had a single previously residential block, which in Chicago is very standardized. It's around 20 feet by 120 feet, just, a grid. So we had this one block, and this lot was a little wider than typical Chicago block. I think it was like 25 or 27 feet wide. There weren't many opportunities for like zoning, doing any getting any zoning relief in any way because it was just a single lot. But in Chicago, you can easily take your side setback on one side of your building and cut it in half. So we did that, gained ourselves like a foot and a half, and that was a big deal. And ultimately, what we ended up with was, I'm not sure, I think it was around 23-foot span inside the interior space. So yeah, it was an extremely tight lot. We built to the maximum of the zoning envelope. The rear of the building actually the ground floor kind of slips as far as it possibly can under the L train tracks. And then it cuts back for the floors above and then comes up. So every inch was a premium in this site.
I have your I'm not looking away from you. I'm looking at your pictures as you describe it to me. Boy, that is right next to the train.
Hmm.
Uh, Easy access, public transportation.
And it was being right next to the train station was an opportunity to use artwork to advertise the building. So that was always a core concept.
In one of the images I saw online in some of the research I was doing before this interview, I saw the term, again, quote, masonry quilt concept for this building and the exterior design. So tell me about the exterior design and the materials you chose to use on this building.
The masonry quilt evolved. We explored two different concepts for the building's exterior expression. I mentioned that this was this organization's first ground up building, and they really wanted it to be a beacon for the city and to be like a physical manifestation of their mission. So, our two main ideas, core concepts were the lantern, which was kind of having a more opaque base, and then at the top, locating that community space where it has views of the city all around. And it would be this kind of like glowing lantern beacon out to the city of Chicago saying, here is a safe space for young people. And then the second concept we explored was the quilt, and the quilt says that this multitude of voices that comprise daily activities at this Broadway Youth Center is expressed through a multitude of different masonry materials on the outside. And we used masonry because it was, frankly, the most affordable material. We had the contractor early on just do a cost comparison of different, you know, skin materials. And masonry in Chicago is typically the cheapest. So we said, okay, we're going to use masonry. It also is nice because it blends with the adjacent residential buildings. So we can really not, we can downplay the institutionalism quite a bit. But what we wanted to avoid was like just a very like typical developer looking brick building. So knowing that we had this layer cake to deal with, like 5 floors, each of them minimal floor to ceiling height. We're like, we don't want it to look like that, just layers of floors. So we made sure to design the masonry panels so they're larger and they kind of slip past the floor, each floor to again take this layer cake of program and wrap it within one singular expression and then really knit it together so that it looks cohesive. So that was ultimately the direction we went. And I won't lie to you, it was because brick was the cheapest material.
But I'm listening to your description, and I think you made the right choice based on what I see around this building. And I'll be perfectly honest, when I first glanced at the pictures before I started reading about the project, I did not know this was a 5-story building.
Mhm.
It does not look like 5 pieces, like your
Right.
typical, multi-story building. So I think you achieved exactly what you wanted to. And in a neighborhood, you want it to be a place that fits in,
Yeah.
not stands out.
Mhm.
You don't want to put a big shiny glass building. People may not relate to that. In this kind of place, you need people to relate, to feel safe, to feel welcome. So I
Right.
think you guys knocked it out of the park on that one.
Thank you.
So I was going in again and going through some of your drawings and pictures. One of your drawings had a list on it, and I actually counted them, 32 different spaces within this building. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh boy, this is going to be fun. How am I going to ask about all this? And so I decided we're just going to go floor by floor.
Okay.
So, starting with the first floor, what would I be greeted with when I walked in? What would I expect to find on the first floor of this building?
So, I'll actually start from the outside because a lot of thought was put into the first impression approaching from the exterior. Because again, we want kids to come in off the street and be like, I feel welcome to go in that door. So we scaled down the entry quite a bit. It's a 7-foot entry door. The awning is at 7 feet above the ground. We brought that quilt expression out into the plaza. So we used pavers that have a similar tone to the brick. So it kind of folds down and it's a very, very modest front yard, but we made sure to have places for kids to sit. So again, it's like baby steps. If they're not comfortable going through the front door, at least we're creating a safe place for kids who may not have a home to sit and hang out with their friends. So there's a bench around the tree. There's a little curb step down to the sidewalk level. And then there's a bench right outside the front door. Those are all places that say, you're welcome here. You are allowed to be here. You are not going to be, negatively affected by being here. So then once we get them in the plaza, then through the front door, it was really challenging to balance security, but at the same time make it welcoming. So we had to use a lot of graphic film in a creative way. So security is very important. They need to make sure that they are um, keeping not keeping tabs on, but making the staff need to know who's coming in the building, to keep it secure. But at the same time, they don't want it to be like Big Brother. So, right when you walk in the front door, instead of having a security person, we have a greeter. They're at the greeter's desk. The young person makes eye contact with them right off the bat. Oftentimes, this staff person, like I said, has gone through Broadway Youth Center, so they can immediately empathize, say, like, you're in the right place, you're welcome here. And then the cafe space is an unprogrammed space where, again, it's like the next gate. It's like, okay, they made it through the door. Now, if they're not going to go anywhere else in this building, just give them a place to sit. They can just sit here. They can get food here. And then if they want to leave, they can leave. Maybe they'll come back, another day. So it's all about lowering the threshold to entry. And the cafe is just an unprogrammed lounge space where kids can ask for a meal or just sit there.
I intentionally structured these questions because I wanted you to talk about that cafe space at the entry, because I really loved reading that was there to one of the things that some of these young people experience trauma over is feeling like they're walking into any institutionalized building.
Mhm.
So immediately making it a place where you feel like you're walking into the local coffee shop, or a place where they might hang out. And so I'm really glad that I was like, if she doesn't ask, I'm going to have to ask her to tell me, or if she doesn't tell me. So, and that takes the entire first floor.
Yeah, so, like I mentioned, this is an extremely dense building. So the cafe space is modest size, and then beyond the door on the ground level, that's where the medical service rooms start, medical exam rooms. So we have medical exam rooms back there, and then level 2, the whole floor of level 2 is medical exam rooms.
And so then what's going on the third floor?
The 3rd floor is the staff floor. So it's really important for the staff in a building like this to have, I think we learned that it was important to them to have some reprieve and a place for respite. It can be a lively building. So they needed a space where it was just dedicated to staff, and we located that in the middle of the building so they can easily bounce up or down. So they have an open office, and then they have a dedicated staff lounge, which is actually really quite lovely and warm and relaxing. So I would say as much effort was put into supporting the staff here as was put into supporting the users.
which is fair. I'm hearing a lot more in some of my interviews. I've done a couple of different hospital interviews over the last couple of years, and there's been much more of a focus on. Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard of a lavender room. It's like, what is a lavender room? Much more
Oh,
focus
I
on.
don't know what that is.
I didn't either. It's a lavender. It's this quiet space with like
Mhm.
spa-like smells and um, maybe some ocean sounds, or but it's a place to go and for nurses or doctors, also in a stressful environment a lot of the time, needing a place to go where patients can't go.
Yeah, just a
Um,
decompression area.
yeah, and there's been a much bigger focus on providing that, and I think COVID was a driver for that.
Mhm.
And the crazy hours and things that our health professionals were going through.
Right.
No reason we shouldn't be doing it other places as
Yeah.
well. Like in my office, I'm calling my office. Um, I saw on the fourth floor, and I don't have that picture in front of me right now, but on the fourth floor, I saw a couple of things that I thought were interesting: a sleeping room
Mhm.
and a large dance and movement room. That dance room appears to also rise to the fifth floor,
Mhm.
um, among other things. So tell me what else going on the fourth floor.
So the 4th floor is where the drop-in starts technically on the 4th floor. So 4th and 5th are that real heart of the building, the social services and the community rooms. So the 4th floor we designed to be quieter and really like all the decision making was centered on like make it like a home, make it like a home. So the 4th floor is like the quieter floor. It has sleeping rooms, which this is not an overnight shelter, but if kids need a place to rest during the day, there's the sleeping room. There's the Netflix area, which is like video games and just relax on a couch watching Netflix. And then there's also some classrooms and vocational services on that floor. And then the top floor is designed to be like the more gregarious floor. So that would be like the living room. And it's what I mentioned earlier, like the big open space with games and, just hanging out with your friends up there. There on the 5th floor, there's also the TGNC room, which is trans and gender nonconforming. It is a specific conference room to support young people who are enabling young people who are trans and gender nonconforming to support one another and learn from one another. So that's a dedicated room. And then like you mentioned, the dance room is the only double height space we were able to preserve in this very, tight program. And the dance and movement room actually was not even on the programming document when we started working on the building. That emerged just through the programming efforts when we were learning from kids. A lot of them just love to dance and express themselves, and there didn't seem to be an opportunity for that in the programming, um, document, so we were like, "These kids, they can learn, they can sleep, they can hang out, but they really need, like, a very exuberant opportunity." So, everything on the 4th and 5th floor is meant to support, uh, all different personality types, like the quieter young people, the more gregarious young people, people who even kids, you grow up and then some are like bound to their bedroom and they want to be alone and they're like playing video games. And then some are like in the living room all the time. So just trying to accommodate all different personality types.
I would be in the dance room
Yeah.
24 to this. I mean, obviously, I'm not a young person anymore, but a dance floor is anywhere within a 20-mile radius of me, and I'm likely going to be on it. So I loved that piece of this building.
It's super nice. I love that piece too. I I'm very proud that we were able to integrate that.
Do they have organized programs around dance and movement, or is it just a place they can go in and crank up the music and do their own thing?
I think it's both. Probably more informal, but they do more formal programming. They also use it for a larger cinema space to screen movies. So we design all so there's the double height windows that in front the train track and the train station, and we design those roller shades with a projection designer. So you can project artwork on the backside of the shades, or you can project, movies and stuff like that. So we thought about, we envisioned young people interested in graphic design being able to design artwork that's then projected out to the city of Chicago.
So I love that. Like, I've never heard of anybody doing that before on the shades. So I'm looking at a picture right now, and it's a picture of that floor next to the train tracks, and there's a bunch of imagery in the windows announcing what this is. Are those
Mhm.
window films, or is this the projection you're talking about?
The projection. Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I listen up, people. That is a fabulous, fabulous idea, especially in spaces like this where you want to be able to use the space for different things. I
Mhm.
mean, in a building like this, I don't think that in a large space like that you can afford to have it be dedicated to just one thing. You have to be flexible, but that you can project on either side of those shades is that's genius. That is totally genius. One thing that I piece together pretty quickly is the variety of spaces and activities that you needed to accommodate all in one building
Mhm.
had to be challenging. And you talked about the challenges, during programming to figure out that flow and where things were going to go. What would you say? What did you find the most challenging to tackle in design in the interior of this building? What was the piece that really worked you as an architect to make what you wanted to happen happen?
Uh, I think the answer to that it was designed very holistically, exterior and interior, like one could not live without the other because we knew the budget was so constrained that we weren't gonna be able to layer in a bunch of additional finishes, and we knew if we wanted to capitalize on, the cost per square foot, perhaps we needed to find a structural system where we could leave things exposed and still create a warm environment. So, and this is just like I'm gonna explain it in hopefully one big swoop. We were like, okay, the the volume of the building. There's nothing we can change about that. We're literally building the zoning envelope. But we want to leave these floors open. Like you said, flexibility was key. And we don't want to spend a ton of money on extra ceilings, extra materials. So we actually we investigated a lot of different structural ideas. And the most cost effective was this proprietary composite slab system called ComSlab.
Mhm.
So it's a metal deck with concrete and okay, So yeah, it has these deep flutes. They're like 11 inches deep. And that enables it to span the full width of the building. And that just freed us up on the interior to, in a building programmed as this, keep spaces as open as possible. And then the added benefit was the underside of that deck actually does look very attractive. So we painted everything out. We left the ceiling exposed in a lot of cases and bounced light off the ceiling to get a lot of indirect light. And the whole goal was to avoid institutional feel. and also do that on a very constrained budget. So I think that was the biggest challenge, and that's how we addressed it.
So let's talk about interior materials and finishes. Obviously, a tight budget, but you've already told me about one thing that blew my mind with these projection shades. Tell me about, and I have seen some in some of my interviews, some architects use some very standard, cost effective products in unique ways. Tell me a little bit about what's unique, or what did you do with the interiors and finishes in this project?
That's a really good question. We spent a lot of time on lighting. Um, I cannot could not care about lighting more. Like I really care about lighting in spaces. So we try to integrate a lot of direct indirect lighting. Again, we were like, we're not doing any 2 foot by 2 foot, lay-in troffers or anything. So we're always trying to bounce light off of surfaces just to create indirect, soft, homey lighting. Um, we every space in this building has a window. That was another um that was another requisite that was never on the chopping block. Even therapy spaces and one-on-one spaces, even medical rooms, every room has natural light. So that was a client-driven decision, or really most of our meetings early on were with the staff, not even like the CEO or the owner's rep, or they were there, but our meetings were with the staff primarily. And they were like, we have to have natural light in every room. So lighting was really important, and I think that we used it in a pretty efficient and creative way, to avoid an institutional feeling.
So you touched on it a little bit earlier. Building departments are different in every city. I still say the most difficult state in the United States to work in that I've worked in, I haven't worked in all of them, is California. It feels
Okay.
like you're working on Mars when you're trying to get a permit in California. What did the permitting process look like for this project? Did you, like you talked about taking that setback and cutting it in half? Did
Mhm.
you have any challenges with the city to get the permit that you needed for this building?
I feel like they're listening to me when I answer this question. Like, building department, don't hear me talk bad about you, but I think Chicago would give you a run for your money, as far as hurdles to get a building permit. Um, it it it's very challenging. This building was relatively straightforward. One let's see, um one building code hurdle we encountered during the permitting phase was a different interpretation as to how we needed to set back this is so technical, how we needed to set back the rated glass on the exterior face of the building. So Chicago is still super, super, um, conservative when it comes to fire ratings on exterior walls because of the legacy of the Great Fire in the 1870s. So they take the strictest, interpretation of any code when it comes to, exterior ratings, and how fire might transfer from one building to the other. So we have this super tight lot, and fire rated glass is extremely expensive. And as I mentioned, we had a requirement to provide a window in every room. So that was kind of difficult because we're like, well, all is this whole facade's gonna have to be rated glass because as soon as we cut down and the side setback that we did not cut in half, that glass did not have to be rated because it's far enough from the property line. But as soon as we cut the other side setback in half, we're now within a foot and a half of the property line. So that glass all had to be 2 hour rated. So we kind of labored over this detail of the window where we would have these rated jambs that brought the window further into the space. I think it was minimum 2 feet from the property line. The face of the glass had to be in order to not require it to be rated. So we designed this whole jam detail that would fulfill what we understood to be that code requirement. And then the city officials who were reviewing it had a different interpretation. So we did have to seek an interpretation and some leniency there for them to understand like this very specific detail that we designed because of this very specific challenge.
So is that where I see, like, I'm still on that picture that's next to the train tracks, the big,
Mhm.
the fifth story,
Mhm.
or fourth and fifth story. So is that where that glass is set back? Um,
Not that location
that's not
because
part of it, but it's set back like that in the lower.
it's set back at it's actually the east facade. So the whole east broad face of the building is
Okay.
all those unit windows are the ones that we had to do like a special jam detail to remove the glass far enough from the property line to enable us to avoid the 2-hour rated glass.
Interesting.
It was
I just thought that was a design decision. I would have never thought that was driven by um, a code requirement. Interesting. Well, good to know too, in case anybody's
no,
planning to do any work in Chicago.
yeah.
Um, I love construction stories because in all the years I've been doing this, I've never seen a construction phase that didn't have a good story. It doesn't, I like to call them challenges as opposed to problems because there are no perfect contract documents and there is no perfect construction phase. You encounter things you didn't expect, or something's not quite coming together the way you envisioned it. It's just a part of doing this work. So tell me about how did because this is a tight site. Like, I'm trying to picture staging for some of the things on this building. Like, how did that work? Tell me a little bit about the construction phase, and were there any challenges that you weren't expecting that you encountered?
Um, there most of them we had anticipated. I mean, there was the logistics like you pointed out, that's was half I mean, we were talking about site logistics from the minute we started conceptual design. We're like, we cannot design anything for this building that's going to require a large staging area. We cannot bring in large pieces of steel. We cannot bring in large anything. So the design was really driven by the site logistics, to be honest. That coupled with the fact that we were going to have to pay to have flaggers on the street for deliveries and flaggers along the train tracks. And as you probably know, they are not cheap. And in Chicago, they're union, so it's really, really not cheap. So we knew we needed like a super efficient fast construction, like to build the structure, it needed to be really efficient and fast. And it needed to be require very little staging area. So that's where the slab system also came into play. So this is the first time I worked on a building that was like a cold form, pre formed panels to form the structure. So it's cold form framing, load bearing cold form framing exterior panels, and they just built it floor by floor. So they'd build the 2 long walls and then slab span, and then the next 2 walls and then slab span. I'm not sure what that would be called, but that's how they constructed it. And it went up so fast. And all they needed was like one crane to crane in these large pre-panelized systems, put it into place, and then span across it. I was, like, truly amazed with how quickly that, um, exterior actually went up.
So do you think you'll consider using that system again on another building, especially if you have one with site constraints like this?
Oh, I definitely would. Yeah, that I think it worked out really, really well for our goals on this project.
What would you say was your biggest lesson learned from this project that made you a better architect on the next project?
Well, I think the biggest lesson learned was I would say there are 2 of them. One is you really can, and this is all gonna kind of relate to the equity point of view more than anything technical. But one is, I learned so much from the programming phase and listening to these young people firsthand explain, what they wanted their day to look like and what they didn't want their day to look like. So I this is the deepest dive that I had ever done into the programming phase and, empathy building type exercises. And from that point on, I'm a huge advocate of like empathy workshops in the programming phase. And my colleagues and I actually have put a lot of effort into kind of underscoring the importance of those workshops early on and really having the end users answer the design dilemma for you, rather than you trying to answer it. So that was my number one biggest lesson from this project, that I continue to live by. And then the second one was how much power we actually do have to drive equity in the world. So this client, obviously, they're a primarily Black run organization. They primarily serve LGBTQ community. So they wanted their construction architecture team, consultant team, and construction team to not only hopefully represent them as much as possible, but also to really abide by and drive equity in the workplace, which in the case of this building was the construction site. So I sat in on the the interviews for GCs, and the client, I was blown away with like the questions that they were asking because it was not just how fast can you build this building, how much is it going to cost, and what happens, when you go over your. It wasn't just questions like that. It was also what are you going to do to affirm different genders when they're working on this job site? What are you going to do um, to help expand opportunities for marginalized communities on your work site? And the contractor that came in just with flying colors with that was our contractor, Bullion Andrews. I will happily plug them because they did such a great job in this interview and then throughout the project. They started implementing, gender neutral bathrooms on their construction site, and they honestly it kind of stemmed many new initiatives for that contractor. And GCs aren't known to be particularly progressive, and they wanted this project, and to get it, they had to meet this criteria because it was a requisite of for this client. So I just learned a lot about the power that you can have if you're willing to stick to your principles in driving change from this particular client.
I love that. About 8 years ago, um, I've been around a while, and my first job ever in this industry at 17 was at a construction company in the office, not on the job site. But we all know what at least the stereotype is. I've seen a lot of companies changing, but we all know what it's can often be like for a woman or a person of color or anybody who doesn't fit the white male image, what that they've historically at least have encountered on construction sites. And I was invited, and I still don't know how I got invited to do this, but I was invited to sit on a panel at a short film, an award-winning short film screening, and the name of the film was Sistit in the Brotherhood. And it was a short 20-minute, it won awards all over the place. Great short film, but 20-minute film about a Black woman's day on a construction site. And this was an industry event, and I was looking at an audience of a lot of women, but not all women, a lot of people of color from different trades. And the conversation after that film was so dynamic about the journey and some of the things that were encountered. And that was like one of my big learning moments in my career. I knew all of these things. I'm a woman coming up in this business. I I was required to wear nylons and heels at one point in my career to work every day. Try that now. Not going to happen. Um,
Yeah.
but I think we all have moments of something that we participate in, and those usually include those conversations directly with those people, that, getting out of your own box and understanding other points of view. And I don't know that we always do a good enough job of that
Yeah.
in our
For sure.
industry.
Yeah.
Just making decisions for what we think you need as opposed to what you really need. Um,
Mhm.
so that's awesome. Before we get to our two closing questions, tell me, what is Wheeler Kearns working on now that I get to call you about to come back on the show and talk to me about later?
So we are working on several really exciting, very special, mission-driven projects. One of them that I'm super excited about is the task force social services building, which is on the south side of Chicago, and it's kind of like a Broadway Youth Center light. It has a lot of the same programming elements, medical and social services, and it also has a dance component. So I'm super excited about that project. We are working on a couple of different overnight temporary housing and shelters. We're working on one in again on the south side of Chicago, and then we're working on one in a nearby Chicago suburb. And then a lot of our work continues to be charter schools and K through 12 education, which is the other primary project type that I typically work on.
Seems like you're finding your path in this industry, um, a lot sooner than I ever did. So we always close with two questions, a broader industry question and our final question. And I'm really curious specifically from you, because I really love what you're doing and the focus you have, that you're the first person I've met that's taken it to that level, or the first firm I've seen take it to that level. And I really respect that. As an industry, where are we failing in the arena of inclusivity in architecture, and how could we be doing better?
Yeah, um it's to me a a lack of having the people in the design room who look like the people we're serving. I think that's still the biggest failure, and what we really need to focus on, and what I try to focus on, is cultivating a whole new next generation of architects who actually look like and have similar experiences to our clients, because we can all do our best to empathize, but a lot of times our clients ask, I mean, they want people who have had similar experiences as them in the room. There were several times when, even working with the Broadway Youth Center, it was like, um you know, make yourself very much look like a young person, and don't come in like don't try to come in and tell them anything. Just try to be there and listen, and try to look like you're one of them. And it's hard to do. And yeah, I think I would say that that's the number one challenge, is the pipeline, and cultivating a generation that's much, much, much more diverse than the current one. And then also, this is just a second piece, making sure that young architects can, like, be authentic, in their role, and I think we're kind of done with the, everyone's wearing black and, wearing the same glasses, and I wanna see much more, personal expression with architects and, um, yeah, authenticity, I would say.
I couldn't agree with you more on that, because it is through having been around for a while. I've pretty much seen the same thing throughout my career, and one of the reasons I now work for a building enclosure firm, but most of my career has been spent in architecture. Um, and one of the things that really made me want to come to this company and has made me want to stay at this company is because you go into any one of our offices and it's all kinds of people from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds and life experiences. And we actually talk about this in our company, and we have speakers that come in and people share their journey, and people that have come up in the business in non-traditional ways like me. But I love that I can go into any one of our offices, and it's truly just this rainbow of people, both in ethnicity or sexual orientation or male or female. And I love that because they do empower their young professionals at my company to be who you are and create and do things the way your brain says to do it, not this older person saying my way or the highway kind of thing. And this is the best place I've ever worked. In all these years that we won't add up for this show, this is the best place I've ever worked. And there's a lot of good things about it, but that is the number one driver for me, is that I can be who I am and everybody I work with gets to be who they are. And
Yeah,
it's a different dynamic. So if you and I together send any message today, maybe some of the firms out there will take a good hard look at that.
yeah.
And
That's I mean, that really goes a long way when you and my firm is completely like that as well. It's like you can really bring your authentic self, and when you're spending so much time there, it's like, I hate feeling like I'm 2 different people, you know?
yeah,
It's tough. So when you can be this, more of a combined person or more of yourself at work, it means a lot.
well, it took me till way, way late in my life to finally be completely comfortable in my own skin. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
I applaud you for pushing the envelope and demanding that you get to do that. Um, Final question. I'm probably more interested in asking you this question than any guest I've ever had. Everybody gets this question. No escaping it. Easiest question of the day. That's sarcasm. We all hope to live a life that leaves some kind of contribution to make the world a better place, or at least I hope we do. Personal or professional, small or large, what do you hope your impact will be?
So I actually have, about a decades long answer to this. There was a time in my life about a decade ago where I was really struggling personally, professionally, finding my path, understanding what it what my goals are with my life, kind of like a, a real dilemma of why am I here, you know? And I think it was coupled with the fact that I was a late bloomer. I saw a lot of people gaining success earlier than me. That was affecting me. I was thinking, why haven't I done such and such? Why haven't I done such and such? And through a lot of, work and mental health work, ultimately what kind of saved saved my life was realizing, like, none of that accolade matters, and really the only thing that is important to me and that I truly have to accomplish in life is making, the people who I interact with, making their lives better in a small way, in a large way, it doesn't matter, but if they walk away and I have improved it rather than made it worse, like, if that's all I do in my life, then that is, like, the one and only goal, and once I came to that realization, it freed me so much, and I can't tell you, like, actually, I was talking to a colleague just the other day, and she was telling me about my star or moon sign or whatever. She said, 2016 must have been a big year for you. And I was like, actually, it really was, because this is when I unlocked that realization that, like, I don't have to strive for accolades. I can just be a good person, and like that's enough. And then that's been my motto in life basically since then.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I was 50 when I finally gave myself permission not to live inside anybody else's box,
Mm.
and that I would just do me and everybody didn't have to like me, and the right people would be in my sphere, and the ones that didn't fit for me wouldn't, and that was okay. And I
Yeah.
could do and my life, my career, my relationships have all just exploded in the most positive ways till I finally gave myself permission. So I extra applaud you for doing it a whole lot sooner than I did.
Well,
But it's the
a lot.
most amazing phase of my life because of it. And so
Yeah.
uh, you just have nothing but great things ahead, in my opinion.
Oh, well, thank you.
So, Emily, nothing makes me happier than to talk about a project that actually changes people's lives. I mean, big, beautiful buildings are big, beautiful buildings, and they're cool too. I like all of the projects we talk about, but the interviews about these kinds of buildings are my favorites. Um, I applaud the work that you and your firm are doing, and I hope to continue to see lots more of it out out in the world. Thank you so much. This has been a lovely interview. You know your stuff very clearly. Better tell Wheeler to keep an eye out because people might be coming to steal you. Just saying. But I really appreciate you joining me today, and I hope you'll come back and tell me about another project again.
Oh, yeah, I would be delighted to, and thank you for the time today.